Firstly, this place, Royal Academy Schools, without Reynolds there wouldn't have been a Royal Academy, and certainly not a Royal Academy school. Unlike many contemporaries probably, as an heroic figure, someone who saw himself as a hero for art, someone who believed in the grand style and believed in the idea of genius and believed in the idea that genius could be achieved. The people who work hard are the ones who succeed, whatever they do. And it was once reported in the Times newspaper that Sir Joshua Reynolds, the President of the Royal Academy of Arts, is shaved and powdered and at his canvas by 9 o'clock in the morning.
What about royalty, public figures, state figures, politicians? Do you think Reynolds had achieved that level of celebrity status by the time of his death?
He certainly had, yeah, and he could go to dinner with anyone, couldn't he? And everyone would be pleased to have him to dinner, that was the thing, which was also bad for his eyesight, but he didn't know that at the time. But if that's what he wanted, celebrity, and being able to sit at the table of the highest people in the land, then he achieved it. I don't think any of the students here think that they're overnight going to become famous and rich, but there are precedents for it, aren't there? I mean, he could have been a painter in obscurity, couldn't he? But he wanted to be a public figure as well. So there was a political aspect to this too. He was very proud to be Sir Joshua, and he was very proud because there was a moment when he wasn't made court painter to George III. He was overtaken by another painter, and he thought that was it with the royal family. But he did get his knighthood, and he was put back into favour with George. So that came correct. But it's the income, I suppose, that becomes rather obscene, doesn't it? And especially, I can imagine what the area around Leicester Fields was in the 18th century. There would be very clear signs of deep poverty among some of the population of London. And here's this man who's only a brush hand, who's making thousands and thousands of pounds out of his craft. But that was his whole purpose, was to do that, was to raise the status of the artist above the level of what before then had been called a limner, someone who just went from town to town making drawn portraits of people. He wanted a very high professional status for artists, and that's what he had to achieve, and that's another thing that he is important for.
Reynolds was very much, I think, the kind of first public state funeral given to an artist.
Well, it would be, because he was by that time, being treated like a statesman, wasn't he? And the whole country, or certainly the whole of London, would be mourning Reynolds' death. And then there were 91 carriages followed his cortege to St. Paul's Cathedral. I mean, 91, it's remarkable, isn't it? Well, it's an interesting comparison with him and Constable, for example. He came to London and then rarely went back to Suffolk, to his roots. Gainsborough also left Sudbury. First went to Bath, where he kind of honed his skills before coming to London. But he wasn't toing and froing the way that Reynolds seemed to. I don't know how many times he He moved from place to place, but it was more than once, wasn't it? There must have been something in the southwest to nourish him, and I think it's quite remarkable that he didn't do more paintings of the harbour or the landscape. You know, there's one, isn't it? That's all, because it was portraiture solely that seems to have occupied him.
And of course he established wonderful relationships with Southwest patrons, thinking of the Parkers at Saltram House
And the Elliots.
and the Elliots at Port Eliot Estate.
I like that. I think living with the embarrassing number of Reynolds portraits and paintings that we have here at Port Eliot, they slowly sort of seep into you, really. And I was particularly drawn to the portrait of Anne Bomfrey. I think you're aware start to become so aware of them as people as well as a painting. I've grown to really love that portrait. Her face expression is wistful, but you can tell that she was intelligent. She's got a sort of set to her shoulders, and she looks like she knows where she's going in life. And I rather miss it, actually, because at the moment it's at Plymouth Museum, although it's very nice for other people to see it. And it's sobering, really, to realise that many of the portraits hanging here at Port Eliot by Reynolds have been hanging here since they were painted. And I feel very, very privileged to have spent any time walking amongst them.
Oh, that's all right there. That's fine.
When we were talking about the Sitter's Chair, we touched on the painting The Tragic Muse with Mrs. Siddons. And this remarkable theatrical pose that she happens to be in. And she claimed to contemporaries that it wasn't a pose. She just entered the room, sat down, found herself in this particular attitude that Reynolds painted her in. It seems extremely unlikely that happened. And she and Reynolds would have collaborated on how to give her this extremely tragic. She's dancing, isn't she? It's a very tragic dance with her arms and her chin. But it was sufficient to inspire Reynolds to do one of his best paintings, I think, The Tragic Muse. The discourses were written by Reynolds, sometimes copied by someone else, especially when his eyesight was failing. He would get an assistant to copy up the discourses in order to read them at the General Assembly of the Royal Academy, which at that time was located in Somerset House. It wasn't until 1868 that the Academy moved to Burlington House. In 1869, when the schools was built on the back of Burlington House in part of the vegetable garden of Burlington House. So he'd been dead for about 175 years before the Academy got here. It's significant there because we still have his statue out in the courtyard. And I find it slightly irksome that that big thing of Anish Kapoor has kind of as brutalized Reynolds' statue, because we're very proud to have it there. And in the summer, when the summer exhibition is on, he's given a garland of flowers, in honour of his first presidency.